Hello friends, Tal here, and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at Protection Warriors, what makes them so good, and why they're being hailed as the best progression tanks going into Legion. Now, as most of you are probably aware of, it mostly comes down to Ignore Pain and how strong Ignore Pain is, and the way that it works on everything when it comes to tanking. So to go ahead and back up a little bit, right now in the pre-patch environment, Warriors are pretty strong, right? And at 110 in Legion, a lot of raid testing has been done with Warrior tanks, and there's a couple of reasons why. I want this video to be kind of an explanation of at least my thinking on why they're so strong, why they're so sought after, and why it's very, very possible that they might just be the best progression tanks, just using the data available to us. Now, it does need to be said, some people, through their testing on the Legion beta, with raid testing and mythic bosses, heroic bosses, things like that, it's been said that Warriors, while very, very good, Ignore Pain isn't like the be-all end-all amazing thing that we see it being right now in the pre-patch. Reason for that being is that it usually gets popped very early. Even with all the rage that you're getting, it's not quite enough to keep it up all the time. But we're going to be talking about why all this focus on Ignore Pain could potentially be very, very bad for Protection Warriors, to the point where if they do get nerfed, it could end up crippling them in an unfair manner. So to begin with, we have Ignore Pain. Now, Ignore Pain is part of Protection Warriors' active mitigation. They have two. They have Shield Block, which they can pretty much keep up all the time. It's very, very cheap and has a long duration, and Ignore Pain. The problem with Ignore Pain is that it is a 90% absorption shield that works on everything. This is magic damage, this is physical damage, this is just something that you keep up on yourself all the time. It's too good in every single situation to really not have any sort of discussion or thought process as to whether you should shield block or you should ignore pain. No, you just ignore pain all the time, always. The reason this causes problems is that even without traits, it's very, very powerful, and it's only going to become better once you get the artifact and once you get enough points to get to the traits. You can actually see that there's two traits that affect the artifact or Ignore Pain for Protection Warriors. There's a golden trait, which increases the amount of Ignore Pain ignoring depending on if you block. And there's also another trait which just passively increases the amount of Ignore Pain absorption by 2% per stack. It goes up to 3, and of course you can get an artifact that increases it even further. So even without the traits, it's very, very powerful, and it's something that once you get the traits and everything else, it's just going to be multiplicatively getting worse and worse. The other problem that you have to think about is a lot of talents really synergize well with Ignore Pain, to the point where they kind of feel like they're ignoring Shield Block a little bit. You have Ultimatum, which combos very, very well with Vengeance. And Ultimatum being that when you shield slam critically hits, you get a free Focus Rage. And when you Focus Rage, you get a cheaper Ignore Pain. When you Ignore Pain, you get a cheaper Focus Rage. So you can actually keep both of these things going and have very, very cheap, sometimes free, basically, Ignore Pains on you at all times. Which is, the combination of those talents makes it even worse as far as balance concerns. Then you also have the combination of Indomitable and Never Surrender. Indomitable being the choice that you take when you're at pretty much more than 75% health the entire fight, get bigger, stronger Ignore Pains, or Never Surrender when you're lower on, like less than 50% health or so. And you can see here that the talents, even they just support Ignore Pain and boost it even more and more and more. Kind of ridiculous, honestly. The problem is also not just that they can mitigate very, very well, but they have a devastating amount of rage utility. Protection Warriors get access to Inspiring Presence, which gives a 3% leech on your entire raid. That's 3% of the damage your raid is doing, they're just healing themselves for free. For not even trying to, they don't have to, do anything, they don't have to sacrifice too much for it, or they can take Safeguard, which is giving their charge or intercept basically vigilance on a 15-second cooldown, and it's a fantastic ability for very specific boss fights. If you don't need the giant raid-wide healing and you need more active cooldowns for your co-tank, or for just people soaking mechanics, Safeguard just seems ridiculously strong, and that again is tied into the talent system that Protection Warriors have. Making the situation even more difficult is the fact that traditionally shield tanks that rely on block have always been very powerful at the beginning of an expansion. If you think back to WoD, Paladins and Warriors are very, very good in Heimel and started to drop off a little bit towards Blackrock Foundry when Monk kind of rose up because of the way the mechanics were based and the way that their stagger kind of cheesed all of it, making them already good in the very beginning of the expansion, plus having these tools available to them with Ignore Pain and the talents and everything. It kind of culminates in a bit of a problem where they're just good at every scenario. They're good at everything. There's no real big weakness that they have. And that kind of brings me to my biggest point about all of this. I think that for the most part, tank balance is pretty solid. I think that Warriors are a little bit better than the rest, and maybe they need a slight adjustment. But the issue is, because everything ties into Ignore Pain, their talent setups are tied to Ignore Pain. Some of the artifact traits are tied into Ignore Pain and just making it better. The issue I can see is if Ignore Pain takes too much of a big hit, you now see Protection Warriors being kind of useless, kind of pointless. If they take too big of a hit, it will cripple them. And it's hard to do any sort of nerf without having to untangle the mess that they've created with the talent system, because as much as I'm one to be all about, synergy and talents, that's fantastic, that's great, I like synergy in my talents, nerfing or changing one thing there could make the entire cookie crumble. And that's kind of the issue and the worry that I have for Warriors. I think that if you're trying to push mythic progression or anything, being a Warrior is a very nice safe bet, except for the fact that Blizzard does balance changes all the time. I was a Windwalker monk in Heimel. I had 2 weeks of glory before they nerfed me very, very hard. And you have to remember that it wasn't that Windwalkers were just really, really good. It was the fights in Heimel were designed almost perfectly for Windwalkers. And while everyone didn't have the best gear, Windwalkers didn't scale as well as everyone else. So them having the best gear available, like their best stats and everything, that didn't matter as much to Windwalkers. So they got kind of unfairly nerfed to the point where now even in Hellfire Citadel, before the pre-patch, they were still, full best mythic geared and still doing atrocious amounts of damage. And you have on the other side of that, Brewmasters, which starting out were kind of weak, but they got such a massive buff in the very beginning of Heimel that it traveled into Blackrock Foundry, making them so good that some guilds were running double Brewmaster for progression, for world first racing. That's ridiculous. And that's my biggest worry of Protection Warriors. I think that there's a couple people saying, myself included, Protection Warriors OP, OP, OP. The problem is, if they don't do intelligent nerfs or intelligent changes to some of the ways that they work, maybe bringing some more talents into buff up shield block, you can get in a situation where you cripple the Protection Warrior. No one wants that. I don't want a tank spec to be crippled. I want it to be balanced. And I think that they have been taking steps to balance all the tanks with the recent changes, the hot fixes, all that kind of stuff. I think they're on the right track. They maybe need to hit Protection Warriors one more time, but they need to be very, very measured in their approach, because it would be very easy for them to make them unplayable. And honestly, if everything is so reliant on Ignore Pain and you make Ignore Pain bad, then yes, you do kill a spec. Anyways, guys, that's just kind of my thoughts on Protection Warriors. I wanted to talk a little bit about why they're so fantastic, why they're so good, and maybe give you a little bit of an insight into my thought process. One of the reasons I'm not going to be maining a Warrior anytime soon, unless, for some reason they don't get any changes going into the first raid. But I do have this fear for them, and I'm worried that maybe Blizzard won't take the most measured approach and will hit them so hard they just won't be able to get back up. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Catch you next time. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and drop it a like. You can subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content just like this. And I want to thank the time each and every single one of you took out of your day to go ahead and watch this, as well as a very special thank you to my Patreon patrons who continue to make this dream a reality through their monthly continued support. If you'd like to go ahead and become a Patreon patron, you can go ahead and click right there on the logo. It'll take you right to the page. And other than that, you can go ahead and tweet me or follow me at Tauriel here on Twitter. And I hope you guys have a wonderful, fantastic day. See you guys around.
Turns to gray. We'll calmly walk away from the fray. When structure falls and all else fails, we will build it once again. We can climb high, higher than before, or we could stand by while it burns to the floor, though we cannot fly. We will build